Well, joining us now to expand a bit more on this disturbing situation is Femi Dare, who is the Managing Director and CEO of Security Systems Ltd. Welcome to the program.
Yeah, good afternoon. Thank you for inviting me. Appreciate it.
Now, you had this...
Happy New Year.
Yeah, same to you. Thank you very much for acknowledging that as well. Can the data, though, get any grimmer based on the reports that you've seen?
Well, the situation looks very horrific at the moment. But from the way things are going and the effort with the present effort by the Nigerian Armed Forces, I think there's going to be some little bit of respite in the days ahead. There's hope, you know, as we say, as we want to call it, especially now that the bandits are being labeled to be terrorists. I mean, that will probably portend a different approach by the armed forces on how to tackle banditry and kidnapping in our country. The truth of the matter is, if there's anything to go by on how the Boko Haram, operate, kidnapping is one of the sources they use to generate income to buy their weapons. So, tactically speaking, that is a very fundamental part to what we should do to try and put some level of control to the insurgency in our country. So kidnapping, banditry, robbery, and all sorts, drug trafficking, even trading, is also means, because if you don't have the right funding, you cannot execute the threats. So they take that very seriously, and that's one area where I think we should try and focus on how to reduce kidnapping in our society, kidnapping for ransom, which of course goes a long way to funding the bandits against the Nigerian state.
So what then would you say is the way forward? I mean, this is a brand new year. How do we bring the numbers down this year?
First and foremost, there has to be a tactical change, a little bit of local control. Security, if you cannot anticipate crime, you cannot stop it. First and foremost, we have so many ungoverned spaces in our society, from local government to local government. They also look at the ungoverned, apart from the ungoverned space, you also be looking at ungoverned situations where a local government, we cannot account for those that live within a local government space. So I think everybody must take responsibility at this stage, from the local government chairman to councillors to state government, to state governors. Because cascading crime from that level is what gives you information that you need. So the issue of depending on the armed forces alone, maybe a strategy has to change, where, the locals are part of the, just like what you have the civilian joint force, in Borno State at some point, which to a very large extent also helped to curtail the activity of the Boko Haram insurgents in Borno State. So that should be replicated across the states. If there are these areas where you think, even if they have to be paid for it, that could also help, because information is very important. And if you don't get the right information as when you should, and the right intelligence, then there's nothing you can do.
Mr. Dare, what you just described to me sounds a little similar to state security. That discussion has been bandied around quite a lot in the last couple of weeks. Can you talk a little bit about this? And also, on another point, earlier you mentioned the economic activities of the bandits or terrorists as a good way to pinpoint exactly where they are and to suss them out. If you could expound more on what is being done towards that area, that would be great for us.
Well, Financial Action Task Force reported a few years ago. First of all, it's important we identify the source, how these bandits fund their operations. Because money, they say, is everything. Once you have the money, you can speak all the language you want to speak. So if we're able to trace and reduce their source of income, where they can raise money to buy phones, equip themselves, and buy equipment to fight against the Nigerian state, that's another tactical way to look at winning the war. And there are things we must also consider. You know, kidnapping for ransom is one of the sources of generating income. So we must tactically and intentionally approach how that can be resolved. That can be stopped in our locality. And it's also important to know that these bandits, these terrorists, they deal on cash. So if they kidnap you for cash, it's obvious, you know, how did they get the cash out of society? How did they take the cash to buy weapons they need for their so those are little things that we must focus on at this point. Apart from the manpower we're using to decimate them at the moment.
Now, Mr. Dare, this current administration at the federal level in Nigeria likes to pride itself on the fact that it's fighting terror and that Boko Haram has been technically defeated. But I would like to have your assessment of the federal government's anti-terror war. What are they getting right? What are they doing wrong? What can they do better?
Well, to a very large extent, you know, I think we are used to celebrating first finish lines in this country. Which to me is very disappointing. To start with, you know, when you're dealing with a group of people who are into guerrilla tactics and warfare, you cannot, you know, begin to give yourself credit for what you have done or what you have not achieved over the years. Apart from the fact that security is not what you buy off the shelf. You know, over the years, there's been this attitude of government not to focus on things that actually matters. We cannot have a country of over 200 million people with very porous borders. Our armies are not well, you know, armed. They are not well, you know, fortified. At some point, you know, our Nigerian army could not even face the terrorists. They had more weapons than our Nigerian army as a country. So, and we also forget that these terrorists are trained. They are not just, you know, they're not just ragtag army like people like to describe them. You know, these are well-trained people. You know, and over the years, they acquired training over the years, and because of poor intelligence, we could not identify this threat until, if only previous government had known that the insurgents would cost over 35,000 lives in our country, I believe they would have taken it more seriously at the initial stage. Nevertheless, you know, we are where we are, and it's what it is. We believe that every Nigerian must, at this point, you know, leave their political interest and take this country as a unit. It's all of us concerned. It should not be seen along the political divides, APC, PDP, or whatever it is, because everybody will come and tell you they can do better. APC came and said they can do better, but this is where we are. So now I think we want to see stakeholders from across divide, across political parties, coming to think about it. You know, if, for example, we just keep our political interest and put Nigeria interest first, and we all decide to work together as a country, we will defeat the insurgents. But you see a case where certain states, you know, want to use it as a political point, you know, against the ruling party, the other one is trying to use it. We're not going to get up anywhere. So I honestly feel that, you know, it's everybody's call. It's everybody's duty to be honest about it, because if you don't have a country, I don't know what are they going to govern?
Now, I want to quickly go back to the report and the numbers prior to introducing you on the program. There's quite a huge disparity between the North and the South in terms of the statistics that we heard. So I thought perhaps you might be willing to sort of shed more light regarding if you think there's more that the North needs to learn from the South in terms of how security is being dealt with. Or do you think geography should not play a part when it comes to tackling insecurity?
It does. It does. It plays a very huge role in this. First of all, we'll come to education. We'll come to civilization and exposure. You know, the northern part of this country has been deprived for so long a time. And if you look at how those part of our country have been managed with all the resources they've had, they've been in power for longer than every other part of the other regions. The people have not been empowered enough to think for themselves, because education gives you the ability to think for yourself and take decisions for yourself. So in a case where you have the majories and which is also another way in which these BH people get their funding. It's difficult to say how people are easily indoctrinated into, committing such crime against their own fellow brothers or sisters. But down in the South, there's some level of civilization, some level of exposure, which have also played a very key role, in a situation whereby, the Christian faith and the Islamic faith usually coexist, and nobody says it that way. But there in the northern part of the country, they're extremists. Even the BH said, they not even believe in the type of Islam that some other people they preach. So it's a very complex situation, and it's so devastating, to be honest.
It is quite a devastating and complex situation. We all live in Nigeria and hope for the best as we continue on with our daily lives. Thank you so much for joining the program this afternoon, Mr. Femi Dare.